with a smile on your face when you're moving from place to place. Good morning.
And welcome back to Youth Wednesdays. This morning we have a very much of a surprise guest this morning. We want to delve into the political arena this morning, and this morning we want to talk about Tobago's business, or don't mind Tobago's business rather. And to have this discussion this morning, we have none other than the Honorable Chief Secretary, Farley Chavez Augustine, and the interim political leader of the Tobago's People's Party. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you both for having me.
Right, and this morning, I'm not the only one going to be doing this interview, but I'm doing this interview with my brother Luke.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chief.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Trim. How are you going?
I'm good.
All right, fantastic.
Right. So you're here because we saw the public banter or the back and forth between you and the Honorable Prime Minister, and you made a post that came to much of a surprise to many of us. Care to explain what spawned that comment from such a person as yourself, an honorable person like yourself?
Well, good morning again, Tobago. Good morning to those who are viewing. Sometimes you have to just give a one-liner, one statement, right, to put things into perspectives and to put people in their rightful place, so to speak. And the statement is very clear, very logical. And the statement is also backed up by a video and 2 photographs from Act 40 of 1996, the 5th schedule. And when you look at the law, there are several things that fall under the remit of the central government and thereby the Prime Minister that are left completely unhandled, and then things for which he has no remit, no position in law whatsoever, he is trying to have a position on. And so I needed to remind the Prime Minister that his business really and truly includes the 6th schedule. So when we have police stations falling apart, when we have prisons having to be relocated because it was in a bad condition, and I had to intervene and send works and spend teaching money to repair the prisons so that Tobago prisoners can be here, so that families can have contact with them, so that our prisoners don't get corrupted and end up in a pipeline for criminal activity. That's his business. When we look at the autonomy bill that is lagging before Parliament, that removed several of the things that Tobagonians said they want in an autonomy legislation, that's his business. When we look at what's happening with our fire stations, I saw representatives of the union in Tobago recently talking about the state of the stations and their tenders. In particular, what's happening down at Crown Point, what's happening at Scarborough. I'm trying to find about 350,000 to help them complete the works in Scarborough, but that really and truly is his business. Right. And so ever so often, we have to remind the Prime Minister and the central government what their business is and get them in line. Because if you don't, you will have situations where the little bits of autonomy that we do have, we will not enjoy them because those are the ones they will seek to mess with while ignoring what their business really is.
Right. So, we want to go back a bit because many of the viewers might just have seen the post and be like, wow, the Honorable Chief Secretary is disrespectful. And I want to presume that this was as a consequence of the op-ed that was posted.
Yes.
Right. Were you angry? And more than that, do you find your comment disrespectful? Because many prominent persons in this space are saying how the Chief Secretary could use the word damn towards the Prime Minister.
Well, in my world, respect is earned. In my world, respect is a two-way street. In my world, respect isn't automatic because of age. In my world, he is an equal. In my world, regardless of his age, the fact that he is the second highest ranking person on the order of precedence, as set by cabinet, in my world, respect must be a two-way street. And if sometimes if you if you don't trade your lamb-like character for a lion, people will walk all over you. And what I see is a great deal of hypocrisy pervading the space. Hypocrisy in that we have had instances where former Chief Secretary, PNM Chief Secretary, will lash out against UNC Prime Minister and UNC and at the time People's Partnership for coming to Tobago to give out hampers, for giving out food cards in Tobago, for doing social programs in Tobago. There's even on record from a Chief Secretary London saying to the then Prime Minister that she has no authority to call an election in Tobago. And yet we have a bunch of red hypocrites running around in typical sycophantic style, encouraging the trampling upon Act 40 of 1996. That cannot be allowed, and sometimes you have to forcefully push people back in line and remind them of what their business really is so that they can remain focused on the task at hand. And I do that respectfully, and some may view disrespectfully. But as I said, respect is a two-way street that goes both ways.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
All right, so Chief, Trinidad and Tobago has been regarded as a twin island. You know, we are under one republic. However, you know, conversations of building an autonomous Tobago has always been in this space. So my question is, do you support, you know, the call for secession from Trinidad and Tobago? Do you think that Tobago can stand on its own as an autonomous island? Country, if it becomes autonomous.
Well, I have never been a proponent of secession. And we can have a twin island republic with devolution of powers. This is nothing new. There is no magic to it. It exists elsewhere within the Commonwealth. In St. Kitts Nevis, they have a federation, for example. In the United Kingdom, they have broad, sweeping devolution powers. So even as we speak, Scotland is part of the United Kingdom, but Scotland can pass its own laws. Scotland can set its own taxation policies. Scotland can hold a referendum if it wants to determine whether it wants to actually secede or not. Scotland has these broad, sweeping powers while they remain a part of the United Kingdom. And outside of the Commonwealth, you have federations existing. You have other examples of how powers can be devolved from the center to outlying regions. So that doesn't in any way challenge the notion of there being a twin island republic. Let me also hasten to add that this notion that there is a unitary state that does not exist anywhere in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. It doesn't exist anywhere in our laws. And it just doesn't exist as a legal concept. But what we seek to do is to have powers devolved so that Tobago can take care of its socio-cultural, socio-economic needs and its development trajectory. And let me give you some basic examples. And one of the reasons why we push back, and Tobagonians by and large push back against the autonomy bill that was proposed, is because it was short on some ideals. And simple example, if you live on an island where if you want to have a marine park, you have to ask someone else to set up a marine park for you, and more than 2 years pass and it can't happen, then clearly your development is not being considered as priority. For us in Tobago, our environment is considered priority. It's part of our tourism product. It's part of our industry. And so we need to have established legislation so we can manage marine parks around the island. But since 2020 November, we sent a bill down to Parliament for them to consider it. We are now in 2023, and it has not even been considered to the point where it reached the Parliament floor for debate. And the point is, Tobago's development continues to be stymied by virtue of the fact that we really and truly do not have the kind of autonomy to make the moves we want to make. And we have to be sure when we are getting the autonomy that we are getting what Tobago needs for its socio-cultural, socio-economic development. That's also quite critical, because what if you're not careful, what will happen is that somebody will give you a half-picked duck, as we say. They will give you a 6 for 9, and then you will realize that the autonomy you thought you were getting, you really did not get. And that's what you don't want. And that's why many in the space have made an argument about defining Tobago in the bill, defining Tobago waters in the bill, ensuring that Tobago has legislative authority over some of the waters that exist around the island, or sufficient enough so that we can, develop the blue economy. All of these things are part of the broader conversation that we have to have. And so all of this about the back and forth between the Prime Minister and I, it wasn't much of a back and forth, because I just gave one line and that's it for me. So if the Prime Minister wishes he could fight a plan on his own, I gave one line and that's sufficient. But the overarching issue at hand is really Tobago's autonomy. And the question of Tobago's autonomy is not necessarily about secession. Now, I will tell you two things. One, there are some Tobagonians who believe in secession, and that's their right so to believe. And number two, I am afraid that if Tobago doesn't get the autonomy it desires in my generation, the generation that comes after will be far more radical and might very well believe in disrupting the Twin Island Republic for secession. And my strongest advice would be, let us get that internal self-government arrangement right so that we can prevent future generations from wanting something much more radical than my generation desires.
All right, Chief. And in this space, I don't think much people are aware of how all legislative bodies work. So when they hear about, secession and building an autonomous Tobago, they view it as, Trinidad is our central government. That's where Tobago get their money from. If we are to, quote unquote, part ways from Trinidad, where are we getting our money from? So the question now in this space is, what resources does Tobago have? Like, what as an island can we produce? What do we have already existing that in the event we do achieve autonomy, we can thrive off and we can build a stronger economy than what we are getting now from Trinidad? Because I know when it comes to budget, we always have that one issue that we're not getting enough. We're not getting the budget that we deserve. So when we build an autonomous island, what resources do we have here in Tobago to finance ourselves?
Right, so an autonomous Tobago does not necessarily mean a seceded Tobago. Let me be clear on that. So having a more autonomous Tobago does not mean that Tobago becomes an independent nation state. That has not been the advocacy of any of us in the House, perhaps except for the member for Roxborough Argyle that is on record of for asking for secession. In fact, his position is we should start at that place when we negotiated, and then we will probably get to the place of the kind of autonomy, the kind of devolved powers that we desire. So let me say that clearly. Secondly, the issue of resources. I don't want us to have a misconception about Tobago's contribution to the national budget. I know some maliciously and deliberately parrot this nonsense that all Tobago contributes is really about $200 to $250 million in tax revenues that is collected on the island. That is rubbish. That is not true. And there isn't an accurate reading anywhere of Tobago's contribution to the national economy. So let's start there, because the law actually says that all businesses that operate in Tobago should and must or shall pay their taxes in Tobago. But guess what? Several companies in Tobago don't pay their taxes in Tobago. I am sure Courts and American Stores and Republic and Royal and Scotia and FCB and all of the big banks and Unit Trust, I'm sure they don't pay their Tobago, well, Unit Trust wouldn't be covered under the tax, but I'm sure that these major institutions don't pay any of their taxes in Tobago for their Tobago business. So it's just on the surface of it, it's difficult to say what is Tobago's truest contribution to the national purse. But we are also very much aware that right in Tobago waters, there is the extraction of hydrocarbons, the extraction of natural gas from within waters in Tobago. And I'm sure 100% sure none of these oil companies actually remit their taxes for the business that is done, for the revenues generated from the extraction of resources from the Tobago space to Tobago. So to get a good judgment of what our contribution is will require some research that doesn't exist. Now, knowing that fact, part of the autonomy conversation has to include a funding arrangement. And one of the arguments I have made, even prior to becoming Chief Secretary, is that we ought to have embedded, enshrined in the Constitution, a formula for which Tobago receives funding. Because we are part of one country, and it's presumed that for as long as we are part of one country, very often you will find Tobago's resources not coming directly to Tobago. Only natural gas being drilled in Tobago waters. They're not being piped directly to Tobago because Tobago does not have the capacity on land to refine natural gas in any form. So it has to be piped where we have refineries and we can do that sort of work. And then we get a product that we can use and a product that we can sell to the world. So that is understandable, that is expected. But there must be a formula as opposed to just a percentage by which we calculate diligently what Tobago gets from the national purse. Currently, based on the Dispute Resolution Commission ruling, Tobago can get between 4.03% of the budget and upwards to 6.9% of the budget. We never get to the top end. We have never gotten to the medium point either. So what we have gotten at the last budget was $4.30 out of every $100 spent in Trinidad, and I want Tobagonians to understand that. For every $100 spent in this country from the state, Tobago received $4.30 for its development agenda. $4.30 from $100. And you see how much is being spent in Trinidad versus how much is being spent in Tobago on development. And then ask yourself if $4.30 out of every $100 really equates to sufficient funding for Tobago's capital development. Ask yourself if that's sufficient to manage all of the items, about 33 plus, in the 5th schedule that Tobago is supposed to be responsible for. In the 5th schedule, Tobago is supposed to be responsible for air and sea ports, for example. But if Tobago is supposed to take the monies to build new airport and build a new seaport, the money doesn't exist there. And so it's with deliberateness that Tobago continues to get between $4.03 and $4.30, and the two major parties in Trinidad haggle and compete over who giving more. When in reality, the most we're getting is about $4.30 on every $100 from either of them. So half a dozen are one, 6 of the next, no real difference. Same coin, just different side of the equation. And so we always lose in the budgeted exercise that happens. As we speak, we know that debates are about to commence for the midterm review, and that's where the Minister of Finance will return to the Parliament and will either increase the budget or presumably can decrease the budget. More than likely to be an increase based on revenues, extra revenues generated, might be an increase based on need and based on the kind of social programs that must happen to get the economy moving again. And so when that happens, I'm sure you should look and see how much we will get out of the rebudgeting exercise. See how much more we will get. But I guarantee you what we have had in the past up until the last budget, which is this fiscal year, is $4.30 out of every $100. And on top of all of that, we are using out of that $4.30 to help the Prime Minister mind his business in Tobago, for things that are the Prime Minister's business.
Thank you very much for that.
Sure.
While we're on the support and the subventions from central government, in the op-ed, the Prime Minister highlighted, upon you guys coming into office, you had a meeting, and that Tobago continues to enjoy maximum support from central government. The question is, can you attest, and to what extent, and how do you anticipate this maximum support being affected in light of
let me save you. That's all political rubbish. You see, there is a kind of political passive aggressiveness that happens. You sit in the meetings, they smile, they nod, they agree, they say yes, it will happen, and then you have to fight to get it to happen on the back end.
And what are some
let
of
me
those
give you
things?
an example. Case in point, town and country planning. I brought the motion to the House, took the thing to the Exec Council, had it approved, met with Minister Beckers in Tobago and the team from planning in Trinidad, sent a legal team down to Trinidad, sat before the Parliamentary Council. The lawyers, everybody agreed that based on the law, the THA really and truly should be executing the functions under town and country planning. We are more than a year since that happened, more than a year since the promise. The THA has prepared the space for the workers to migrate into. We have committed funds to paying the workers, to subsuming the workers, to paying for the technology, for paying for digitization of Tobago records, all of those things. And to this day, we still have PSs telling us, oh, we don't feel like we're ready in under 2 years. We ain't ready yet, and all sort of shippiness. Who is the corporation soul of the country, to provide me with a list of all of the national boards, committees for which the THA by law is required to have a representative. We are now in 2023. That request first was made in December 2021. In fact, the first government minister I met, it was the Minister of Finance, even before I met with the Prime Minister. And to date, something as simple as that, I cannot get the list. Well, it might be simple in your in our eyes, but it's not so simple because they really don't want us to know of all the boards of which we have members on, because they really don't want us to really have an input. But the point I'm making is, it is that kind of pattern. On one end, smile, nod, pretend as if we're going to support, and then on the back end, just sit and don't do anything.
And I think
that
it's
has
imperative.
been a constant pattern.
I think it's imperative that I do ask, though. What about the subventions? Have they been consistent? And I know it early. I think it was early last year. You asked the finance minister to have the Tobago subventions coming at a particular frequency. Has that been consistent?
Well, it's not at a particular frequency. The law says that the subvention must come in quarterly blocks, right?
Has that been consistent?
At one point, yes, and then it just ceased.
Okay. And
so the pattern is not as quarterly as it was when we first made noise about it. And the question I have to ask, rhetorically, of course, is it that I should return to the media, return to the public and make noise every Monday morning over these things? Or find a way to get the thing working, find a way to get the island moving, notwithstanding? And perhaps part of my fault is I'm not making enough noise. I've been too quiet, too polite, perhaps. And that's why the one cryptic line got people all up in a frenzy. But I understand the political game at work. The Prime Minister is having a difficult time in Trinidad. They're murdering everybody down there, left, right, and center. He can't manage crime down there. The economy down there is in shambles. They are seeing diminishing returns on their political moves. We're seeing all sorts of exposés about members of his cabinet and how they may have poor dealings. And so he's looking for a distraction. The village idiots with a soapbox, they need a distraction. They need something to talk about. And that's why I was very clear in just giving a one-liner and letting that be sufficient. so that people know quite clearly what are THA's responsibilities as enshrined in the 5th schedule, and what are central governments as enshrined in the 6th schedule, and also the 7th schedule, which are services that must be delivered on the island, in the island of Tobago.
Right. And I think it's imperative, before I go over to Luke, that I must ask, in light of what happened, your statement, and given what had happened with Eric Williams in the past, are you fearful, right, that, you know, the Tobago might suffer because of this public banter between you and the Prime Minister?
No, well,
how would you try to avoid that and make sure that Tobago gets what it really deserves, and there's no repeat?
Let's be logical about this. Right. I don't know that Tobago could suffer more than on the hands of the central government than we already are. They will continue to give their $4.03 or $4.30 based on how they feel per budget. That will continue to happen. I don't see that changing any way or the other. So whether I shut up and zip my mouth, as I was told by a former chief sec contestant, we should zip up our lips. If I zip up my lips, we'll still get the $4.03. If I talk, we're still getting the $4.03. Let me say something to Tobago. This is an island that had a long traumatic experience with colonization, and we are by and large descendants of or byproducts of colonization, and all that came with it. And so we, more than anybody else, should understand the dynamics between house slaves and field slaves. And I know that there are some house slaves that would prefer that we continue to curtsy, bow, and hopefully we get some extra crumbs from the table. While those of us that are toiling in the field understand that we just have to break up this colonial relationship and let Tobago have an equal place, side by side, not a ward off. I must say to you guys who are younger that this is a historical matter. It predates all of us. It predates the 41 or so years of the modern Tobago House of Assembly. You must understand and appreciate that when Tobago was joined to Trinidad, Tobago at that time already had an autonomous assembly. Tobago had its own AG. Tobago had money and monetary systems and trade systems. And when Tobago was belonged to Trinidad, Tobago had to have a reduced autonomy, because Trinidad at the time did not even have an assembly as autonomous as Tobago had. Tobago had voting, elections, and so on before Trinidad had that. And we were forced to give that up and become subservient to Trinidad. In fact, as I observed yesterday when I was reading through some historical records on Tobago, Tobago had to give up all of its laws and just adopt Trinidad. So it's not a nothing that Tobago had to give up itself, give up its identity to be a part of this relationship called Trinidad and Tobago. That's what happened when we became a part of the one country. And I'm saying both Trinidad and Tobago, both people living in Trinidad and Tobago must appreciate that we all collectively, both in Trinidad and in Tobago, have to correct a historical wrong. And to correct that historical wrong, it means that the descendants of slaves and indentured laborers and migrants have to come together and say quite forcefully, we are going to correct these historical wrongs. We are going to ensure that we make good of this creature that we have called a republic. We can't be a republic where we got rid of the monarch as our head of state. Jamaica is now debating whether they should remove the monarch and what steps they should take to become a republic. Only now in 2023, when they became independent about a month before us. But at our age as a republic, we should have already corrected all of these historical wrongs. And it's not just with regards to Tobago. It's also with regard to indigenous peoples. It's also with regards to simple things as the names of places in the country, for example, that are still named after some people who never came to the country, some people who were not heroes, who were destructive and murderers and rapists. I don't know what it will take for us to be bold enough to rearrange this country as a whole to the point where we correct these historical wrongs. And every party, every major party, both PNM and UNC, they will all and always campaign about constitutional reform. And when they get there, they will do nothing about constitutional reform. When in reality, we should be aiming to evolve, to revolutionize the republic in such a way that we can truly add meaning to the term that is a republic.
All right, Chief. So earlier in our responses, we were speaking about the math, the $4.30. And I think we need some clarity when it comes to the finances, say, that passes through Trinidad and Tobago. Now, we live in Tobago and we know that we had a major issue with the contractors in terms of getting their payments. However, you would have stated that the relationship between you and the central government was one that is, they just laugh in your face, pretend that they're going to answer your claims and not do what you asked to do. However, there are also claims in the space saying that in terms of the contractors, you would have requested $100 million and it was granted to you. Can we discuss that some more, please?
Sure, of course. The matter with the contractors is a complex matter. You have to remember that when in January of last year, I brought to the attention of the public and the island some egregious financial acts that happened to the Division of Infrastructure, where hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts were given out without any due process, and things look shady. An audit was commissioned. I made it very clear that I will only be paying in accordance to the recommendations of the audit result. We got the final audit result for phase 1 of the audit that affected 3 of the largest contractors, where between the 3 of them, there were over 80 projects. On those projects and things that were audited, I would tell you as a matter of fact that those contractors receive payments as advised by the audit report. Not a cent more. I'm not at liberty to talk in greater details about the audit and what the results showed, but each of these contractors were written to by our legal team, and the egregious acts were pointed out to them, and they were given some time to respond as a course of natural justice before we take a legal case. I could tell you from this standpoint, one public officer has already been fired based on the results of the audit, and there are more actions to come. But given that a lot of this will be quite legal, it will require me to hold my peace and be very judicious in what I share in terms of information. In terms of other contractors, payments are being made based on verified claims. Now, you have to appreciate that the contractors who are making noise for payments from 2021 and 2020, they must appreciate that we have contractors making noise for payments from as far back as 2002. So $100 million sent to pay contractors on the island really and truly is not even a drop in the bucket. We have a court case right now for $80 million for a contract from 2002. We have claims from 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from contractors. Some of them, the companies no longer exist in the space, and those two have to be serviced. So it's not just those who are owed recently that must demand their monies and that we must pay, but we also have to pay some of those that we owe long before. No.
Okay, Chief, I'm sorry to interject you.
One more thing before I go on, and I do have an 8 a.m. meeting, but if I am to say, let's treat this fairly and start paying from the oldest bills and pay the newest ones last, you know what will happen? Many of those making noise now will not get a single cent. That's the reality. And so it's about balancing, paying some of the older ones, paying some of the more recent ones, paying some in the middle, and having equity across the space. So that's how we're managing it in a very fair way. And as I've said before, contractors can't get all of their monies because we will only pay as funds are available. We can't pay what's not available.
Okay, Chief. So just to clarify the question I asked, is it that you all did get the money you requested from the central government? Is it that you asked for it and it was granted to you? I think that's the question we're trying to clarify here in this space, because we saw claims on social media just being thrown around. So the question now is, did you request the money and was the money granted?
Yes, because I made it clear to the Ministry of Finance. I said, look, if we are to service all of these debts, and this was since December of 2021, when I met with the Minister of Finance, when I first made that request, I said to the Minister then that we were inheriting just over $900 million in debt and liabilities, and that for those debt and liabilities to be serviced, the central government will have to send monies separate and apart from what it sends for capital development. Since 2021, that conversation started. You know, we got some. Remember, I said it's over $900 million in debt. We got 100 million of that in 2023. From 2021 to 2023, we got that. And so contractors who were caught up, some of them who were in the public space talking, some have gotten quite some millions for their work. And that's what I'm saying. Monies are being paid to contractors as we speak. But I'm also making the point that the debt that we inherited as estimated in December of 2021 was just under $1 billion. So if it's just under $1 billion, that is not even a drop in the bucket. And that's why I asked a rhetorical question to the contractors who are owed 1 year or 2 years. Should I do the fairest thing and start with the oldest bills first and pay those, come forward, and leave all the new bills for last? Or should I continue the strategy that we are using, which is some of the new ones, some of the old ones, some in the middle, and try to cover all bases as funds are available? But the reality is, in just one program that happened pre-election in 2020, pre-January 2021 election, in one program, we had in excess of $300 million just being thrown out in contracts, in excess of $300 million. Now, if 100 million came to service our debt to contractors, wouldn't there be several contractors still, or several projects still that can't be paid?
Okay, Chief. So unfortunately, we've reached the end. You know, we're all out of time. I really wish we had more time to discuss, you know, that inherited financial crisis that we have here in the THA. But, you know, you're always welcome here on the Youth Wednesday show. And probably in our next segment, we'll be able to delve deeper with more time. I hope management is listening to us, you know, with more time, and maybe we could finish up this conversation. So, Chief, I want to thank you for joining us here this morning on the Youth Wednesday show. Dwayne.
Yes. And we need 2 hours. Just putting that there, 2 hours with the Honorable Chief Secretary, and hopefully next week could be once his schedule permits.
Yeah, I need to check that.
Right? I need to check that once his schedule permits. So I want to thank you very much, Honorable Chief Secretary, for having us, and from us, the Youth Wednesday host and Tobago Updates morning show. I want to thank you very much. You guys have a great day, and remember to
share the life, share the life, share the life. We'll be right back.